All right, welcome. In this explainer, we're going to break down a really powerful theory about what human reason is actually for.
You know, we tend to put reason on this pedestal, right? We think of it as this flawless superpower that makes us special. But what if that's all wrong? What if its biggest supposed flaws, its bias and its laziness, are actually its greatest strengths, perfectly designed for its true purpose? Let's dive in.
Okay, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at how reason actually works under the hood. Then, we'll get into its social purpose. After that, we'll see how its so-called flaws are really features, clear up some common confusion about the theory, and finally, put reason back in its true place.
Think about it for a second. We humans can reason about literally anything, from what to have for dinner to the laws of physics. So how does one single mechanism in our brain handle all of that? If it's a specialized tool, how does it have such an incredibly broad reach?
Well, the key is that it works indirectly. See, reason doesn't just spit out a conclusion like grab an umbrella. Instead, it gives you an intuition about a reason. You see dark clouds and your reasoning module goes, the chance of rain is a good reason to take my umbrella. Evaluating the quality of that reason, that's what the module does. Then you reflect on that and decide to actually grab the umbrella.
And this is a super cool concept. They call it virtual domain generality. It sounds complicated, but all it means is you have this one specialized tool that's an expert in one thing, judging reasons. But since reasons can be about absolutely anything, this one specialized tool can indirectly touch everything.
A really good way to think about this is to compare it to our sense of sight. I mean, your visual system is incredibly specialized, right? All it does is process light. But think about how that one function indirectly shapes almost every single thought and decision you make. Reason is just like that. It specializes in one thing, and that gives it a massive impact on everything else. So, just like your eyes have learned the general rules of how light behaves, reason has learned the rules of, well, reasons. It gets the general stuff, like whether an argument is strong or relevant, but it also gets specific rules, like how in a legal setting, or even just a family squabble, what happened before the precedent really matters. And this specialized function tells us a lot about why it evolved.
Okay, so this leads us to the first big, and maybe kind of radical conclusion of this whole theory. Reason isn't this grand general-purpose thinking machine. No, it's an adaptation that evolved for one specific thing, our crazy, hyper-social lives. At their core, reasons are for other people.
And this idea really puts two big theories head-to-head. You've got the classic intellectualist view that says reason is for you to think better, and it should be perfectly objective. But that just doesn't line up with all the evidence on human bias. Then you have this interactionist view. It says reason is for justifying yourself and convincing others. And in that context, being biased and lazy isn't a failure, it's exactly what you'd expect.
You know, this might be why so many of us still cling to that old intellectualist idea. It's because we are fantastic, really good, at seeing the biased, lazy reasoning in other people, but we're almost blind to it in ourselves. We hold up this ideal for ourselves while seeing the messy reality in everyone who disagrees with us.
So this brings us to the real kicker. What if all those flaws that psychologists have documented for decades, our biases, our mental laziness, what if they aren't flaws at all? What if they're actually features?
Yeah, the interactionist theory just completely flips the script on this. It argues that these traits aren't bugs that break the system. They're built-in features that help reason do its actual job, which is social.
So how does that work? Well, think about it. That my-side bias we all have, it's not a bug, it's a feature that helps you build the strongest possible case for your side. And being lazy, that's just being efficient in a conversation. Why bother exhausting yourself thinking up every possible counter-argument when you can just wait for the other person to tell you what their objections are and then you deal with them?
Okay, it's really important to pause here because this theory often gets misunderstood. So let's clear up a couple of the most common mix-ups.
So, first up, does this mean that reason is just a cynical tool for manipulating and tricking people?
And the answer is a hard no. Absolutely not. Because remember, reason isn't just about producing arguments. It's just as much about evaluating the arguments you hear from others. The two skills had to evolve together, hand in hand. Deception only works in a world where most arguments are actually honest and can be checked for their real merit.
All right, here's the second big misunderstanding. Since reason seems to work so well in groups, does that mean it evolved for the good of the group as a whole?
And again, the answer is no. This is not a group selection thing. The theory is very clear. Reason is for pursuing individual benefits. You personally benefit when people accept your justifications or when you persuade them. Sure, these things happen in social settings, but the benefits are all yours. It's a tool for a world where you have to constantly earn trust, not one where it's just given away freely.
Now, what makes a theory really powerful is that it doesn't just explain what we already know. It makes new, testable predictions. And that's exactly what the interactionist theory does. And its predictions are completely different from the traditional view. This table really lays out the night and day difference. The old view says we should be objective all the time, both when we're making our own arguments and when we're listening to others. But the interactionist theory predicts something totally different. It says when we're producing arguments for our own side, we'll be biased and lazy. But, and this is the key, when we're evaluating someone else's arguments, we suddenly become demanding and objective.
Okay, so let's look at that first prediction, that we're biased when we make arguments. This isn't exactly a groundbreaking new idea. In fact, it's what scientists call a retrodiction. It's basically just a new way to make sense of tons and tons of old research on things like confirmation bias, stuff that the old intellectualist view never really had a good explanation for.
But that second prediction, that's the real game changer. The idea that we are objective and tough when we evaluate other people's arguments, that is a genuinely new and original prediction from this theory. And we're starting to see really cool evidence for it, especially when you look at studies where groups of people solve problems together much better than any one person could alone.
So, what's the big takeaway here? The goal is to finally take reason off that broken pedestal. It's not some kind of magical, divine force that's separate from the rest of our mind. It belongs right there in the trenches with our other cognitive tools, doing its job.
And once you see it that way, you can really start to appreciate it for what it is. It's not a broken tool for finding solitary truth. It's a perfectly evolved mechanism for navigating our intensely social world. And it is powerful, it is subtle, and it's just endlessly fascinating.